Welcome to an invitation to sisterhood. We want you to join us on a journey as we discuss everyday issues affecting our lives. Women in the Bible and of Christian history continue to have an impact on the world even years after their deaths. We can learn so much from them. They are sisters of inspiration, and we're all sisters in Christ. Today we're talking about natural family planning, also known as NFP. Our guest today is Fenar Kashat, NFP instructor at St. Thomas Chaldean Catholic Diocese. Our sister of inspiration today is Saint Teresa of Calcutta. And of course, I'm joined by my co-host today. Patrice Abona is director of ECRC, and Adora Ibrahim is with Mission Advancement for Benedicta Leadership Institute for Women. So, natural family planning.
Yes.
I'm going to share something really embarrassing. I had no idea what that was. I thought natural family planning was Planned Parenthood.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So I told you it was going to be embarrassing because I had no idea.
Yeah.
And then, I get engaged and they said, you have to go through NFP. I'm like, well, what is NFP? What is natural family planning? And so I didn't realize until I went through it how important NFP is. And I was so grateful that the diocese required it.
Well, it wasn't required for me when I got married, but I didn't tell my husband that. And so we went to the class, and then someone there was like, yeah, it's not required for you. He looks at me, he's like, it wasn't required. I'm like, listen. And so I found it to be beautiful.
Well, it was required because I got married at St. Thomas, and then Father Frank, who's our bishop, required it at his parish.
Yes, I got married to Mother of God. We weren't required.
Okay.
I wish we were required to know what NFP was because we weren't. In our marriage prep classes, almost 21 years ago, we went through, I guess, whatever you consider the normal marriage prep, but that wasn't a part of it. And I think every single couple that is discerning marriage needs to know about NFP. It's life-changing.
It is life-changing. And even as a woman, when I learned it, I was so much more in tune with my body. I loved it. So even though we didn't really wait that long to get pregnant after we got married. We only waited 3 months. I did NFP for those 3 months, and then I haven't really done it since, but I still know my body. I can still say, okay, because, then we wanted to try. I was like, I can say, okay, we're fertile today, or, hey, if you don't want this month, we need to wait. Without even being as systematic about charting, and I'm sure Fenar will go into all the details, it's still just nice to know what's going on.
You think that's why, my husband wasn't into it either, and I think he thought it was more about me than him. You know what I mean? I thought it was really interesting, but he was like, "Oh my gosh, do we really have to do this? And why was this necessary?" And I think it really is about the woman's body. Honestly, if you look at MFP, and as Fenar will explain, it is what we're going through, and it's our charting. Now, I never even did it, because I was older and I wanted to get pregnant. So me, I just never even. I was like, whatever. I just want to hurry. I want to get pregnant and have kids. And it took me 3 years to even have my one child.
So then you would use NFP in the other way, or then you're using it to try to conceive.
Well, that's what I was. I was trying to conceive. I wasn't trying to avoid conception.
Yeah.
But I won't even get into that because I didn't even use it. Because it was like, let's just get pregnant.
Right.
So,
but I think it's another. We were talking. We always talk about Mother Church and all her wisdom, and I think it's another beautiful tool the Church gives us.
I agree.
And I had a really good. I was reading this book. It's an amazing book called The Sinner's Guide to NFP by Simcha Fisher. If you want to laugh, read that book. She's hilarious. But she really goes in there and she's like, look at the alternatives. So maybe you're not as convinced about NFP, but look at the alternatives. Putting chemicals in your body, using a barrier method, pulling out. Like, what are your alternatives? So even if you're not as convinced about NFP, that should even just convince you.
And I think the beauty about today is that it's so talked about, and there are way more books than there were 20 years ago.
Because I knew about it way before I got married.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's just different.
Yeah.
My godson and his fiance, as soon as they were engaged and they took their marriage prep classes, they then took extended NFP classes that were not even required by their diocese.
Yeah.
But they really wanted to know together, and he wanted to know all the details too. And I think that it's just brings the couple closer together. And I think in this day and age of social media and technology and all the other resources that we have, it's an incredible tool to help marriages stay together.
And there's so much, because we are the internet age. That's what I did when I understood what it was and went through the classes. I just Googled everything I could possibly Google because I was so fascinated by it. And it is a great tool, and regardless of whether you're trying to get pregnant or not wanting to get pregnant, and it's actually easy. if you look at it, it's not that difficult. Like you said, you get to know your body and you're like, oh, this is kind of cool, to understand what you're going through.
Interesting, yeah. So I'm interested to hear more about it.
Oh, yeah. And is it required by our diet? Maybe
It's not required right now.
It's not required.
And then we're in the stages right now of redoing marriage prep and revising it, and we are actually having that debate of should it be required? Because if you force someone to sit in a class, they're not engaged, and so there's that.
To be honest with you, but you know what? Father Frank, Bishop Francis did force if you got married at St. Thomas.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody was bored. I mean, I think I talked to the other women getting married at the same time. We were all like, oh, this is really cool. And I just think just like marriage prep should be required. And I'm glad that Eastern Catholic Evangelization Center, Patrice, where you're the director of ECRC, is helping the diocese revamp marriage prep because NFP is obviously part of marriage prep, and Fenar will tell us that. But I think marriage prep in general is so important.
I think it's a huge linchpin to the success of Catholic marriages. And I would say that it should be required, and only because when there's something that can bring a couple closer together to understand each other in a way that they might not otherwise understand each other, then why wouldn't you want every couple to have that? It's the beauty of marriage. It's just, another part of the sacrament of marriage.
I think that's another beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Saint Teresa of Calcutta is our inspiration, our sister of inspiration, who wants to share with us. Not many of us need to know who Saint.
Yes, right. She's our modern day saint, so we all know.
So, but why her in NFP? Why?
Mother Teresa said, "Children are like flowers. You just can't have enough of them." Whoever said having, too many flowers is too many. So Mother Teresa was a great saint of our time. She necessarily didn't have any huge books or encyclicals or what have you, but she was onto something when she was teaching about NFP. She knew that special connectedness that only comes between a man and a woman, and what could be better than when a couple shares that, intimate moment of trying to have a child or to plan out their family. So I think Mother Teresa, in her way of not necessarily, preaching about it, but actually teaching about it, actually being, on the front lines like she did with everything else in her ministry. She was just a great example of, humility and truth and beauty.
Yeah, and I think when you think about, probably the environments that she was in such a, in the trenches. Yes. And there's a lot of situations where they say, we really need to get more contraception to these people. We need to get more contraception to the starving, communities across the world because they can't afford to have babies and they can't. Why don't we just teach them the natural way? Why instead of, giving them more chemicals and all that? I think it's beautiful that Mother Teresa had that, Saint Teresa, had that wisdom to know, let's teach them the holy way.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times, people think that, oh, this is such a complicated topic to deal with. It's really not. It's human nature.
Yeah.
And the wife will do her part in knowing her body, and then will bring her husband in, draw him into the whole process. What could be more beautiful than that?
Yeah.
And that's not that difficult. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know, what your body's going through each month and what's happening, and is this a good time for our family or not a good time for our family?
And I think it adds an intentionality behind your sexual union, but your greater union of your marriage.
Absolutely.
Intentionality.
And as parents.
As parents, are we open to life this month or not? Why or why not? And you have to ask yourself every month. And then, that time when hey, I know you want it because I want it, but, this is our decision right now, so we can't right now. And then not to be bitter about that.
Sure.
It's just, you have to be so intentional about it.
Absolutely.
It is easy, and then it's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does take willpower, though.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Willpower, faith, and grounded in your faith.
Yes. Yeah. When you know the why, it all becomes easier.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to continue this conversation with Fenar Kashat. She's going to join us, and I'm really excited. She's an NFP director for the diocese. So stay with us, everyone. We're going to continue this conversation when we come back. And we're back talking about natural family planning called NFP, and Fenar Kashat is with us to talk with us about NFP. Fenar, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So as I embarrassingly admittedly said, I didn't know what NFP was, and I'm sure there's people watching who don't know what NFP is. So what is it?
So NFP, it's a general term. Obviously, it stands for Natural Family Planning. It's a general term for any natural method you would use or a couple would use to try to plan their family, whether they want to use it to conceive children or whether they want to use it to prevent pregnancy for a period of time based on what they discern. Interestingly enough, and I've been teaching for 14 years, and I've dispelled a lot of myths about NFP, but NFP is just an umbrella of many different methods. And all of them are scientific methods developed by scientists, not the church. But the earlier methods, and I joke, the earliest method we've had was around the 1930s called the rhythm method or counting. Just count. Yeah. And when I teach my class, I joke, I am a product of the rhythm method. Yeah. My mom used it.
So they say, you know what you call people that use the rhythm method?
Yeah.
Parents.
Exactly. So it is not very effective. So the earlier NFP methods were not very effective, but we had kind of a breakthrough in around the 60s. And we've developed two prominent methods, namely the billing ovulation method. This is the method I'm trained to instruct, and then the symptothermal method, and there's a lot of derivative. And those methods, believe it or not, are 100% method effective, 99% user effective.
Okay, so it's scientific, but yet adopted by the church. Is that accurate?
Correct. Or maybe
recommended by the church?
Recommended or blessed by the church. So
taught by the church.
Well, it's typically taught within the church because of the morality aspects of it. And it's just like anything in creation, right? God has created everything and everything was good, but us human beings took it and used it and abused it and we screwed things up, right? Mm-hmm. So because NFP conformed to God's design and God's intention for marriages, that's why it has the blessing of the church. And that's why it has kind of like the endorsement of the church.
Okay, so did you go through NFP? Did you say you did?
No,
it wasn't required,
yeah,
right,
we'll
Adora?
be married 21 years in November, and that was not a requirement for us during our marriage prep, and I wish it was. I ended up having 3 C-sections. We did use NFP in between our pregnancies, but the doctor scared me at the end of the 3rd C-section and said, oh, you need to have your tubes tied because if you have more C-sections, you're going to rupture your uterus, not to be graphic, but these are the things you end up dealing with and not knowing, what the church's stance was on all those things. Talk to me about real life situations where, I may have heard of it, but I really don't know, what would a person do in that situation?
You make a good point because I was told to wait 18 months to 2 years to have a second child because I had a C-section because they said my uterus might burst if I got pregnant.
They scare
before. So I was like, really? My uterus could burst if I hit, And so, and I didn't go back to my NFP training or thinking of or what I learned. I was just like, oh my gosh, I was so scared that my uterus could burst and then I am not having any more kids. I got older and I never got pregnant again. So that's a really good point. When you're told something by your doctor and then it doesn't coincide with NFP.
Now, as an NFP user and instructor, I have to admit there has been a positive change. So when I first started teaching it, people didn't even know what NFP is. Mm-hmm. They didn't know what NFP, they probably thought it was Planned Parenthood but it was really a foreign concept. And even myself and the way I got introduced to it, I didn't know. Mm-hmm. In my first marriage, we didn't want to have kids right away. And I did what almost everyone would do. Well, okay, we don't have kids, so we go contraception, right? Mm-hmm. And God's grace always worked because there was such an ache. There was a tug. Conscious is a great thing, right? And I'm like, wait, this just doesn't look right. There's got to be another solution. I didn't know about it. And by divine providence, I was visiting my mom, looking through her junk mail. Mm-hmm. Really? And I went through a Providence Hospital catalog and have they have these classes if you want to do this or healthy or whatever. And it had just a 2-liner about natural family planning. Like, what is this thing? Really? This thing exists? So I took it through the Archdiocese of Detroit. Was blown out of my mind by the class itself. At that point, I have done pre-med education. I'm an engineer by education. And this class was like, whoa. It's amazing. And that's when I really embraced it. And then I got training in it and started teaching it. But the good thing that I've been seeing is there is this trend the change in how people view NFP. So either before they didn't know anything about it, or they're like, oh yeah, NFP, it never works, and you have 17 kids, and or they will use the joke, what do we call NFP users? Parents, right? But in the last maybe 2 to 3 years, I have to say that I'm pleasantly surprised. I have been hearing more positive feedback, either just in general in our community, or I would hear some good feedback from my clients who have learned the method, used it in their marriage. I'll run into them, they're like, oh, you taught us NFP, it was the greatest thing. Wow, and we're using it. So I think it's shifting, and it's a good thing that I'm very hopeful that this will really become the new thing, even for non-Catholics, and even if you're not driven by morality, because NFP has a lot more to offer than just the moral umbrella that we see immediately.
So without getting graphic, because this is not an NFP class, okay?
I need 4 hours to teach you NFP, okay, so it will be very
we're
difficult.
not teaching NFP, but I do, for our viewers who are still trying to figure out what exactly is it.
Yeah.
Can you give us an overview of what is NFP? What is taught really?
Yeah. So what NFP is, as I mentioned, it's a scientific method, and the human body, created amazingly by God, it has we call natural indicators. So we have signs in our body that tells us what's our fertile state, specifically for the woman, because we're obviously not fertile 24/7 and the whole time, right? So there are some signs in our body, mainly a cervical mucus, and there is a lot of other signs that could indicate the fertile status of a woman. So what NFP does, it studies these signs, it learns how it changes throughout the woman's cycle, and then it uses it accordingly. So I always tell my students, it's like, what if I tell you with 100% accuracy your daily fertility status? You're fertile or you're not fertile? Do you need anything else?
Yeah, that's incredible.
That's it. And then you just use that information accordingly.
And you know what I love about that is that it is scientifically based. Yeah. A lot of times the church gets accused of being Stone Age and non-scientific. But in this case, what a beautiful example of faith and reason. And what I love even more is that you're teaching people a way that's non-chemical, because the drug companies want to push birth control for every little thing. Oh, you have acne? Get on the pill. Yep. Oh, you're moody? Get on the pill. You have irregular periods? Get on the pill, So I think this is another wise way to teach people to stay healthy, just in general, non-prescription way.
It's a funny story. About maybe 10 years ago, I was talking to someone and who was a doctor or something like that. And we were talking about NFP and how effective it is and how scientific. And he's like, if what you're saying is true, this is the invention of the century. How come we don't know about it? I'm like, because there's nothing to sell. You take a free class.
That's a good point.
That costs you nothing. Yes. And you have a pen and a paper. And in modern day, you even have an app. What am I selling you? What am I gonna profit from? Wow. It's not a pharmaceutical company where you're like, oh, it's the next thing, right? I mean, you've seen it, the hormonal pill and the ring and this and that and the patch, and they're all really means to make money.
It's literally the epitome of holistic health.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So, and there's this big, huge war, I think, with, holistic doctors sometimes and regular medical doctors. Not always. I know a lot of them blend the two together. But, I mean, what could be better for a woman's body than to do things the natural way, the way that God meant them to be?
It's so true.
We're doing what St. Catherine of Siena always said: if you are what you should be, you'll set the world ablaze. And that's part of it, being who we are naturally as man and woman and as a married couple.
So I recommend to our viewer, Jason Everett, a chastity speaker, has a phenomenal talk called Green Sex.
Okay.
Because really that's what it is. I mean, we want everything to be green and non-GMOs and no hormones.
True.
But what are we doing when we're taking the pills? We're popping our bodies with all these artificial hormones.
Poison.
And it's phenomenal because he has done a lot of studies, so he provides a lot of statistic of the impact of hormonal contraceptive, not just on us as human, even on the environment, on species of fish, how they have been completely
affected by the water.
Affected, So it's a phenomenon, and that's the thing. It's like we want hormone-free chicken and organic eggs, but our own body we're pumping with hormones.
Excellent point. Wow, that's excellent point.
So back to the NFP, the method. Is there a way that the church recommends that we use it, or is it just like everyone should use it all the time, or?
So NFP was very vividly expressed and recommended really by the church in Pope John Paul VI encyclical Humanae Vitae on the human life. And I love the encyclical. It's a very short read, very easy read. It was the church response to the sexual revolution in the 1960s, right? Let's just have sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and everybody sleeps with everybody. And if you read it today, it will blow your mind because it was prophetic in nature. It really was. And the Pope at the time, he said, if we embrace this style, then this is where we're heading. And you look at it now, you're like, we did head there. Oh, yeah. So then in that encyclical, the church teaches that if there are serious reasons, if there are serious motives, a couple are to avoid pregnancy, then the moral way to do it is to use natural family planning. Okay. And the reason why, because the whole idea is when we are married, and when we teach the class, we go into more than an hour of theology of why NFP. And if you look at NFP, it's tied directly to the sexual union between a husband and wife. And then if you read into a little bit of theology, which we probably don't have the time for, it's a sacrament. Mm-hmm. Every time a couple, a husband and wife, come together in union, they're celebrating a sacrament. So much so, as much as the priest is celebrating the sacrament of the Eucharist. So then when you look at what that act is, and how crucial it is and how fundamental it is, there's only one way to treat it. And that's obviously with dignity and full openness to life. So can NFP be used with a contraceptive mentality? Absolutely. And that's where really we get into the danger.
What's the danger? Like so if the church is telling me, okay, I can't use the pill and I can't use the barrier method because those are all obstacles and in my way, but hey, we have 3 kids and we're set, and my husband only has enough, makes enough money, like we only make enough money to support these 3 kids and we're done. Who's the church to tell me that I can't use NFP? I'm using NFP, which they recommended. Who's the church to tell me that I can't use it to I'm done having kids?
And this is the beauty. I referred to conscious earlier, and I even challenge my students when I teach the classes. It's if we are brutally honest, and I mean brutally honest with ourselves as a husband and wife, when we sit down and say, why don't we want another kid? And not to knock your excuse, but I can knock them all. Trust me. Oh well, we can't afford another child. Well, what do you mean you can't afford it? What does that mean? Does that mean you really can't afford feeding a child and clothing it, or you can't afford changing your lifestyle? You can't afford not taking as many vacations and not going out to these fancy restaurants or traveling to all these luxurious vacations. And it's funny because especially newly and engaged couples, we want to take time to travel and we want to do this, which is all good, but all in proper order. And when we're all said and done and we're all leaving this earth, we really only have our legacy and the legacy of the life we've created. Right. And that's where the danger comes in. So the church does teach there are some tangible reasons where a couple are even recommended to abstain. It's funny, there is a myth that if you're Catholic, you should just have as many kids as you possibly can, right? But biologically can. And the church does not teach that. The church teaches responsible parenting. Yeah. So if you bring them forth, you need to be able to care for them. So money is a concern. Right. But as I said, what is it? Is it just I'm not comfortable, not shopping as much or not driving the brand new car? Or is it really I cannot afford them? So that becomes then an acceptable scenario where NFP is the solution. Another one, the instructor that have actually trained me had 3 kids and her pregnancy kept getting more complicated, and it was a life or death for her. Wow. If she was to be pregnant, her life was on the line.
Yeah. Well, there's women that have had cancer. Doctor said if you have another child, you do increase your risk of cancer because of the hormones. I mean, I don't know what the church says on that, but I've known women like that where they had 2 or 3 kids, they end up with breast cancer, and it's recommended that they don't get pregnant again because the risk of cancer is higher. I mean, those are real situations.
Statistic because typically your chances of breast cancer increase because you have periods, which is your menstrual cycle. Yeah. And when you're pregnant, you don't have them. So I don't know. I haven't really looked at it.
Yeah.
But this, as faithful, informed Catholic, and you've touched on it a little bit, when you use NFP, you're empowered. Mm-hmm. You're in control. You have the scientific data. You have the tool. and you use it. And now you're not just being told by anyone what to do and how to deal with your own body, right? I mean, especially the whole feminist movement, we say, oh, it's my body, don't tell me what to do. Then why are you listening to pharmaceutical what to do? Exactly. Why don't you then take it into your own hand and get the knowledge and be empowered?
Yeah,
Especially when it's so accessible and it's so simple.
well, that's the argument I have for abortion too. The pro-choice people, it's like, well, if you really want women to make an informed choice, then give them all the information,
Exactly.
which they do not at
Yes.
Planned Parenthood,
Exactly.
which I thought NFP was. But do you know what I mean?
So they don't teach NFP at Planned
No,
Parenthood,
they
right?
don't. But you know what? It's been a while since I've taken NFP. Obviously, been married a few years now. Does NFP touch upon women who have a difficult time getting pregnant and issues with in vitro and artificial insemination and all that? Is that part of that discussion?
So we do cover the church's teaching on infertility technique,
Okay.
because obviously very few of them are in line with the teaching of the church. So in vitro fertilization, artificial insemination do not conform to the teaching
Sure.
of the church. But the beauty of NFP, so I mentioned the billing ovulation method and the symptothermal method, and there's a lot of modern day derivative method, if we shall call them that. The main one is the Cretan model of the billing method. And then there's this huge, there's a whole institution. It's called NAPRO,
Yeah,
which
I
is
heard about
natural
it.
procreation.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose of these models is to address infertility issue. To see, okay,
Yeah, I
you're
wish I had
having,
known about that when I
you're
was younger.
having frequent miscarriages or you can't get pregnant. What's going on?
Yeah.
And I mean, I know doctors who are actually trained locally in the Metro Detroit area, and I've known, friends and family who have used it, and after multiple miscarriages have been able to conceive and carry to full term a beautiful baby.
Yeah.
So-
That's
and
wonderful.
that's
I've
the
heard
beauty
that.
of it.
It's amazing. Such a gift. Yeah. All these advances in technology. I mean, again, another example of the church and science, going hand in hand.
That's a really good point, Adora, because there's so much thought that the church is not in line with science, and if you believe in science, then you can't be Catholic, and it's just not true. You know what I mean? And I wish I had known about NAPRO. I had heard about it after I couldn't have any kids anymore, but it would have been great to have known that. I never heard of it.
And it is very
it-
effective.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I know people have used it, and I know that our churches recommend it.
Yes.
Recommends it.
So I find I've heard this a lot, and I mentioned earlier Simcha Fisher's book. Have you read that one, The Sinner's Guide to Natural Employment? It's really funny. So anyway, but she goes into some of the practical stuff too. What are some of the? It is easy, but then it's also a challenge too. So what are I know some couples, a lot of couples, even I know, they're like, I have questions about NFP. I'm like, here's Fenar's number, and because I'm like, I don't really know because I don't have a lot of experience, with NFP because I just keep getting pregnant.
I don't think I can
But,
say on TV what I call myself. It's a joke that I have because everybody has my number.
Oh my goodness.
and everybody can call me. But
You're like the sex doctors.
yeah. Oh no. It's a little
No.
vulgar.
So yeah, what are some of the struggles people have with NFP of okay, we tried it and then here we have kid number 2, but we really need to take a break because of X, Y, and Z. What are some of the struggles people
So
have?
I have to be careful. I did say it was easy, but I think a better word, it's simple.
Yeah.
It's a very simple method. It's not very complicated. Is it easy? Depends, right? It does take discipline.
Yeah.
And we live in an age where discipline is really hard, right? Because I just want my cake now, right? Where discipline is a little bit hard. So it does take some discipline to learn the method, to chart, to really know what the rules are, and to actually follow them.
Yeah, to follow them. That's the hard part,
My husband
It's like,
and I
like,
teach-
all right, today we can't. And then my husband's
Yeah.
like, really? I'm like, I mean.
Yeah. We teach marriage prep, and then we say anything worth having in life, you work for. We've all, pulled an all-nighter because we wanted to earn that degree or we want to get that promotion at work. This is just another thing, right? Now, I have said it, and it still stands. If I have a case of unplanned pregnancy that we cannot explain, then I will use that as an example where NFP fails. But typically, what do I get? We kind of knew, but I took a chance. Or, oh, I didn't know that was the rule. Or, well, I really wasn't charting. We had people comment like, where's your chart? I'm not really charting. I'm like, well, so it's when you don't use something correctly, then it's really just destined to fail.
It's user error.
Exactly, it's user error, yes.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest challenge is that really that discipline, that will to know, okay, I'm really attracted to you right now. but I'm fertile and we have made the decision, that we want to wait. But what do I do? What we always challenge the couple is learn to love your spouse in different ways. And I always, this is my personal opinion. Physical love is very easy. You see little babies and they come and they want to hug you and kiss you. It's very easy to express love physically. To express love in different ways means you have to study your spouse. You have to learn what makes them tick. We joke, my husband and I, every time we're out grocery shopping, we come home with our spouse's favorite candy. So he knows my favorite candy, and it's not the same as his. But it's just a small thing, but it requires studying your spouse. It requires knowing what makes them feel loved outside of the touch.
I can't help but think of jalapeno cheddar popcorn. That's what I just brought home from my husband. Yeah, and
jalapeno cheddar Cheetos.
and I'll tell you, I'm not a jalapeno person because you'll see me sweating and needing water and what have you.
But that's the thing. Where if you look at the depth of the sacrament of marriage,
yes,
it's way above the act.
Of course.
And it's very hard to comprehend this when you're young and vibrant and you got all these hormones driving you. But then you can get to an age when you're 70 and you don't even have the desire. Your body may not even function at that point, right? So how are you going to love each other?
Buy your husband Peeps.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
I hate Peeps. I think they're disgusting. I think gross, but they're Ronnie's favorite candy. They're
Really?
Yeah, isn't it disgusting?
We were at a restaurant the other day, and there was a couple. I would say they were probably about 85 years old, and they were beautiful. I was watching them have their dinner, and they really didn't even exchange that many words. But it was like you said, knowing your spouse on a level that really transcends the physical.
It's very intimate.
We are spiritual. We are emotional beings. We are physical beings, and when you get to know somebody on that level, they really didn't even have to have words. They were just sitting there enjoying their, dinner with each other. You could tell the loving glances that were being exchanged, and it was like they were having a conversation without even words. So
and that's really true intimacy. You go back to scripture when Adam and Eve were created, right? And then it says in Genesis is they were both naked and unashamed. And in our marriage classes, we talk about to be fully naked, not just physically, but to be spiritually naked, to be emotionally naked, to be naked with the frustration of NFP and the vulnerability of NFP, but to be that fully naked with your spouse. That is really true intimacy.
Yeah, vulnerability is something key.
You can't be married and not be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
It's not. Then you're not being authentic.
Yes.
It's not possible.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think listening to the whole NFP, for me, it's a little different because I got married older and had complications. So it was me trying to get pregnant. And so, but I can imagine the whole thing of using it to saying, listen, I just had a baby 2 months ago. You know what I mean? I get it, where that would really strengthen your relationship. Okay. You know what I mean? 100%. Like that process of having to be mature about the whole thing.
And then one of the benefit of NFP, and that's why if you look at the statistic of divorce among NFP users, it is astronomically low. It's very, very low.
Oh, okay.
And because the benefit is just goes way above the conceiving or preventing conception. One of the things, it encourages communication. And I'll share a personal testimony where after I had my second baby, I got pregnant and lost the child through miscarriage. Then I got pregnant again a few months later and lost the child. And then I got pregnant a third time and lost the child.
Wow.
And I was devastated. I was scared. I'm like, I know I'm supposed to trust, but this is really hard. And so in talking to my husband, what are we doing? Are we open to life? And no. And I'm like, I can't, I'm scared. But that's that communication, that I was fully vulnerable with my husband, that we worked through this, that I knew I have to bring in healing before I can be fully open to life and fully open to God's way. But if that conversation never took place, then I may not even know what I'm dealing with. He may not even know what I'm dealing with, so he wouldn't be even able to help me. But that's the beauty. That's this is why NFP works, because it's in line with God's design. I said for marriage. Not for procreation, but for marriage.
And you said another really important thing earlier was order. You know, when we live an ordered life, you know, I just think it brings us so much closer to God. Because when you think about the world, what's wrong with it? All of this disorder and chaos. But this is something true and tried and tested. You know, and like you said, if it's done, you know, in a proper way, it just enhances the sacrament of marriage. And I know you work with a lot of couples, and tell me about how some of the guys feel. Obviously, we're all women here, you know. We know how we feel. We know how our girlfriends feel, our sisters, our aunts, our cousins. But share some of the things you can from the guys. You know,
so I've seen the full gamut where, you know, because obviously it's required for the couple, so they both come in.
Yes.
And you see sometimes where the guy is just like this, like I don't know what it is, or get on their phone. But you know, refreshingly, I've seen some guys who are like, you know, taking over. It's like, oh, I want to do the chart, where they're really interested. And so I've seen it all. I have seen so much support, and this is where I want to dispel the myth that NFP is not just for women. Yes, we are the one who are changing with fertility and infertility status, but the husband is just as crucial part of this. It cannot be done alone. And when I teach the class, I always give them some practical tips, some really funny tips on how they can support the charting, some of the observation they can do, which kind of serves their instincts as men. But but it is really, it really is a partnership.
Absolutely.
And I always tell my couples, I'm like, the woman observes, the man charts. Okay. And then there, and one of the very simple, obvious benefit of that, you never have to worry about, am I going to get rejected tonight? Is tonight a good night? Is it not a good night? Because you know, you're doing the charting, so you know, and if you mutually agree that we're postponing, then you know, I'm just going to go out with the boys tonight or something, right?
Yeah.
But that's how you can use NFP to really bring a lot of fruit.
That's brilliant.
Because they can be like, if the man isn't involved and he does feel like every time, you know, he initiates, she's like, sorry, honey.
Yes.
It does become her saying no.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. It
Right.
could be.
So it does remove the burden, really, and also it removes the burden from the wife making this huge decision for the whole family.
So for now, let me ask you this, because we were talking about this in the intro, and I'm sure you heard it because you were standing offset. It's not required by the diocese, natural family planning.
Not yet.
Okay, so that's what
I'm still praying.
Okay,
I'm so praying.
You probably answered you just answered my question, because you know I had to do it because I got married at St. Thomas, and then Father Frank required it of his couples.
Yes.
So I take it you believe it should be required by
100%.
I believe it should be required.
And let me tell you from aside from my own opinion, let me tell you some practical experience. So I used to teach it at St. Thomas when then Father Frank mandated it, and now it's also required at Mother of God. So it is being taught there every other month, 6 times a year. But I have seen some couples who would come in and they're like, I didn't even know this exists.
No,
it's
I was
like,
wondering,
wow, there is an alternative. This is really cool. I've also had the other extreme where I was like, well, what does the church has any business to tell me what to do in the bedroom? Which is fine. But then at least you pray that there is a change of heart. You pray something happens. So if these couples at least are aware of it and are made known, then maybe they're either they'll embrace it right away, and I've seen so many couples who do that, or maybe they're on the fence. But then when they really sit down and they really think about it, at least they know there's something to fall back on.
Well, you know what, the reason I believe a lot of people get defensive on certain issues, whether it be NFP or abortion, is because they never objectively ask the question, why does the church teach that way? Why? Like, I've had so many people say to me, why don't you just do in vitro? What is wrong with you? What, you know, why don't you? And I would say, okay, stop, and let's talk about why the church. I mean, my own family members. I mean, I had close family members saying, what's wrong with you? Everybody's doing in vitro. Just do it. And I said, do you guys realize why the church teaches against in vitro? Do you understand that I'm actually artificially inseminating, and then I'm going to throw out embryos that I don't want? Okay, I want you, but I don't want you. You know
What's really interesting, one news story that just broke out last week at an infertility clinic.
Yes, I saw that.
They had some issue with their nitrogen, and they had all these embryos that are dead. Is that just? And, what about? And we don't think of it.
But for now, I mean, I know women, and I'm not judging because how am I to judge? But they had in vitro and they fertilized 13 eggs. They implanted 2 or 3, and they had their 3-4 kids, and then so they have 10 never being used, right? So think about it, you guys. You have 10 babies. Those are not just embryos. Those are babies.
Yes.
They're now going in the garbage. I mean, I can't. I mean, even the thought, when I think about that, it makes me sick. And so.
And that's a huge problem because this is not that uncommon. You have so many embryos that are just not wanted.
They're frozen.
And they're just sitting there.
And then you either, after a while, the clinics, I found out, they're going to say, if you don't do something with these at this time, we discard them.
Yes.
Or you have to sign off that we allow other women to take them.
That's just it. What if there's an error? What if they put the wrong, embryo inside of the wrong
That's
mom?
happened.
That's happened before.
No,
That
it
too.
has
I mean,
happened.
the devastation that can happen,
You're carrying
because
a
of those.
baby.
Absolutely. It's just something that I can't even imagine.
We touched on it.
Yeah.
And then without being judgmental. But
Yeah.
as sisters in Christ,
Yes.
we are obligated to proclaim the truth of our faith, right?
Yeah.
Because it really is for our own good.
In a
created
charitable
us,
way.
God created us
Yeah.
to be happy,
Yes.
not to be miserable
Yes.
and disordered.
Yes.
So the devil works with small compromises.
Yes.
It's like, well, first you can do this, and then it just keeps getting bigger and keeps getting bigger, and it keeps getting more complicated.
Sure.
And I know, believe me, I could say it firsthand, I understand wanting to have a child. I get it. And, I had 2 miscarriages before I had Elena. I never got pregnant again. I get that pain of wanting your own kid, and I'm not judging because I understand, I know a lot of in vitro babies, okay? They're all around me. I have friends and I love them. But I understand, I truly believe in the church's teaching on that. And when you ask the question, why the church teaches that, and I believe a lot of people don't, they get defensive.
Yes.
Instead of saying, well, why do we why is this the position of the church? You fully understand it. It makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's a great recap to why the church teaches NFP. It's like if you look at the why, and I think it's always so comforting, like, we always talk about Mother Church. I think it's comforting to know that Mother Church, once again, is guiding us in the right way.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fabulous conversation. It went by so fast, Fenar. You've been a great guest. Thank you so much. We're going to continue this conversation as we always do, and we're going to come back to you, our viewers, with our pledge for the show. Stay with us, everyone. And we're concluding our show on NFP here on Invitation to Sisterhood. And Fenar, how enlightening was that conversation?
So now you know it's not Planned Parenthood.
I know now it's not Planned Parenthood. No, it was great information. But what was new to me was how people are not always using it correctly or in line with the church. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it can definitely be used in a contraceptive way, where it's just like, oh, we don't want any more kids, so we're just gonna.
So when we have all this information, it's just so good for us because even if people don't necessarily know what they're going to do with it at first, I feel like it plants a seed. And then we're always searching for the truth. And we want to look for the best way the most healthy way to eat, the most healthy way to do this. Well, what's the healthiest way to space out our families? NFP. I mean, you're not putting anything into your bodies. I love that because all of these different chemicals from big pharma, cause all these side effects that we're constantly hearing on the commercials.
I love what Fenar said. The reason that it's not widely talked about or widely known, even a doctor was asking her that because there was nothing to sell.
Yes.
It's so true. It's like, I didn't even think about that. There's nothing to sell to make money.
Absolutely. And a lot of times with these companies, it's profit over people. Right. And when it comes to Holy Mother Church, it's people. And it's the souls of those people.
Yeah, for sure. And I also liked her point when she said, anything worth having is worth working for. Yes. And that it is because I did do it for a few months there in the beginning. And I did it because I did it before I was married. So I really did it for like 6 months. And it's a lot of work. It's every day and it's charting and then it's interpreting your chart. And sometimes you're like, I remember calling someone once. I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure. They're like, then just abstain. I'm like, really? And so sometimes it's not always what you want to hear, but like the fruits of it are at the end, totally worth it.
Yeah, and I love how she said, she witnesses, the couples coming closer together because the husband's understanding the woman's body more, and it just brings you closer together as a couple, and you find other ways to love each other and express that love.
A couple, I asked them once, I said, well, how did you guys, after you had babies, I know your fertility is a little weird, with your nursing and this and that. She goes, We played a lot of cards. That was like her answer. I was like, okay. And it's like you said, I would never think to sit and play cards with my husband. Right?
Yeah,
There's certain things you'd never think to do, but if you're taking that part of your relationship out for those times of the month, then.
And then she said something, Fenar was talking about how after she investigated a little bit, when couples said, well, it's not working, they weren't really doing it right. And, Adora appropriately said it was human error. So, it is pretty accurate and scientific that has been supported by a church, science supported by the church. So, which is really nice to promote because people always think the two can't go hand in hand. That's science. Yeah.
Two wings of a bird, faith and reason, right?
Yeah.
Can't have one without the other. If the wing is broken, you can't fly.
Yeah.
So.
And it's another one of those things you think of that, all the gifts that we get from being in the faith, being women of faith, we get all these beautiful gifts of the Eucharist, all the beautiful gifts of the sacraments, all the graces that come, and also we get all these tools. So imagine someone that has no connection to the Catholic Church. They don't even know this exists, and we're given these beautiful tools,
So as always, we want our viewers to take something home, with them. What's the take home in this show, and what can you meditate and think about? So we have pledges for our viewers for you today, as we always end our show with our pledges. So stay with us. Here they are.
I pledge to educate couples on the Church's teachings on natural family planning. I pledge to talk to my parish priest about offering NFP classes. I pledge that if I feel a tug on my heart to do more with NFP ministry, I will answer that call.